Hello and welcome to Live Full, Retire Early, the podcast where we build calm wealth, intentional freedom and lives that don't need escaping from. We have real conversations with real people, just like you. So if this sounds like your thing, keep on listening. I'm Emma Woodhouse, your host. I want to paint a really boring yet really common scenario. Everything is fine. You're working, your bills are being paid, and life feels stable enough. It's nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just normal life. And then in the same month, 3 things happen. The car needs a repair. The boiler stops working. And work gets a bit wobbly. None of these are particularly dramatic on their own. And none of these are, oh my God, life is over type of events. But together, they create pressure. And that's usually how financial stress actually shows up. Not with one huge cinematic disaster, but with a cluster of annoying, badly timed problems that all seem to arrive at once. And if you don't have a buffer, this is the moment where your nervous system kicks in before your logic even does. You start doing the math in your head. You start moving money around. You start wondering which bill can wait and which one can't. And you're not bad with money in that moment, you're just unprotected. In the last few episodes, we started putting structure around your money. We've plugged the money leaks, we've discussed the income ladder. We've created a calm cash flow system by giving every pound a job. We've stopped money being random and we've stopped it drifting. But structure on its own isn't enough, because a plan can still look good on paper, but fall apart in real life if it has no shock absorption built in. And that is what this episode is all about. Taking a system that looks good in theory and making it strong enough to survive normal life. Emergency Fund 2.0 turns a plan into something you can actually live inside, without constantly worrying that one bad month will undo everything that you've created. As I've said in several episodes, most financial disasters aren't dramatic. They're relatively boring. It's usually a bill you didn't expect, a direct debit that comes out earlier than you thought, a repair that costs more than it should, a week off sick, a late payment, a rent increase, a cost you thought you'd planned for. It's really one big thing. It's usually a few ordinary things arriving too close together. And without a buffer, the script is almost always the same. A credit card, stress, guilt, scrambling, and that quiet internal feeling that you're somehow failing even when you're doing your best. But the truth is, in that moment, most people don't need more discipline. They just need more margin. Because with a buffer, that exact same situation that I listed previously looks completely different. Annoying, yeah, but fine. And that's the shift we're building here. And I actually learnt this the hard way, like a lot of people, very early on in my journey. It was back in 2012 when I bought my first rental property. It was a 3-bedroom Victorian duplex right in the town centre where I lived. And at the time, it felt like a great deal. I thought I'd negotiated well, even things like the dishwasher being included in the price, which felt like a win at the time. So on the 20th of January 2012, I picked up the keys from the estate agent. Everything seemed fine. Everything looked fine. Nothing obviously wrong. And then, within a week, 2 things happened. The boiler broke down and the dishwasher stopped working. If you notice, every time I talk about a financial disaster, I always talk about a boiler because that was my pain point. I laugh, it's not that funny. Now, neither of those were particularly dramatic, but it was right in the middle of getting the property rent ready. And I hadn't properly built any financial buffer for additional things like that going wrong. So what should have been annoying but manageable very quickly became stressful. I ended up forking out £2,500 on a brand new boiler almost immediately, and the dishwasher just got scrapped. And I remember thinking at the time, not that I'd made a bad investment, but that I hadn't prepared for the reality of how things actually play out. Because this is what people don't always realise. It's really one catastrophic event. It's a few normal, unexpected problems happening sooner than you'd like, and before you've even built the buffer to absorb them. And that was one of those moments that really clicked for me. It wasn't about making better deals, it was about building better protection around them. And honestly, I could do an entire series on that one property alone, because most of the lessons I learned about investing and money in general came from that one experience. So what actually is an emergency fund? I'm sure you've heard this term so many times on the internet. Put simply, it's cash set aside to protect you from the unexpected. Things like job loss, income dips, big repairs, urgent costs, a tenant not paying their rent, and life doing whatever it does. It's not just a pot of money, it's a layer of protection between you and panic. And honestly, I think that matters more than people realise. Because when you have a real, fully funded emergency fund, you breathe differently, you think differently, and you make better decisions, more empowered decisions. And you stop feeling like every unexpected cost is a threat to your entire life. It gives you security, yes, but more than that, it gives you options. And here's the part people don't talk about enough. It isn't just about emergencies. It's about options. And when you have a real buffer, you're harder to trap. You're not forced to say yes because you're scared. You're not forced to stay because you can't afford a wobble. You're not forced to tolerate bad situations because the financial consequences feel too risky. But you can pause. You can think. And you can respond instead of react. And that changes more than just your bank account. It changes your posture in life. Because financial stability isn't just about the numbers. It's about the ability to stay calm when things get uncertain. And that is a very real kind of freedom. Once people accept they need a real buffer, the question is, okay, but how do I stop myself from messing this up? Because most emergencies don't fail because people don't earn enough. They fail because they're set up badly. So let's fix that. Here are my 6 rules for having and keeping an emergency fund. Rule 1, keep it separate. First, your buffer needs somewhere else to live. One of the biggest mistakes people make is keeping their emergency fund in the same account as their day-to-day spending. On paper, it doesn't seem like a big deal. Money is money, right? But behaviourally, it changes everything. Because if your buffer is sitting right next to your everyday money, your brain starts to treat it as if it's available, not protected, not reserved, but available. And that's when it slowly gets chipped away. A bit here, a bit there, justified in the moment. But over time, it dwindles away and it disappears. And the whole point of a buffer is to keep it slightly out of reach. Not impossible to access, but not something you casually dip into either. Keep it in a different account with a different purpose that has different rules. And that separation is what protects it. Rule 2. Don't use debt as a backup plan. A lot of people tell themselves, if something happens, I'll just use a credit card. I'm good. And I understand why, because it feels like some kind of safety net. But it's not. It's just delayed stress with interest attached. Debt can remove pressure in the moment, but it rarely removes the problem. In fact, it often turns a short-term issue into a much bigger long-term one. A £500 problem becomes a £650 problem, then £800, and now you're not just dealing with the original issue, you're dealing with repayments, interest and reduced flexibility. The buffer exists so you don't have to borrow your way through normal life. Because normal life will throw things at you. And borrowing every time that happens isn't a system. It's a cycle you're trapped in. Rule 3, don't mix buffers. If you've got more than one financial world, things like your personal life, a business, property investments, do not mix them. And I can't stress that enough. Each system needs its own protection. Your personal buffer protects your life. Your business buffer protects your income engine. And your investment buffer protects your assets. And this is where people get caught out. They think, well, it's all my money anyway. What difference does it make? Until one problem shows up and drains everything from every buffer. A repair on a property wipes out your personal buffer. A slow month in business eats into your safety net. And suddenly, everything feels exposed. I understand mixing buffers may feel simpler, but it usually just means one issue spills into every other area of your life. Separation doesn't just organise your money, it contains a risk. Rule 4. Never assume income is guaranteed. Whew! Gosh, this one is a beauty. One of the most dangerous assumptions people make is, it'll be fine, money always comes in, until it doesn't. And I've experienced this myself. I spent 16 beautiful years working in a family business, which on the surface felt very stable, very secure. It was the kind of environment where you don't really question your income because it just feels like it will always be there. And then, what happened? I was made redundant. Not gradually, not with years of warning, just done. And that moment really reinforced something for me. Income can feel certain right until the moment when it isn't. And that's exactly why a buffer matters, because it gives you space to respond instead of react. Income can be delayed, it can drop, it can disappear for a while. And the tricky part is, it often feels stable right up until the moment it isn't. And that's why this matters, because a lot of financial stress doesn't come from spending too much. It comes from relying too heavily on the next payment arriving exactly when you expect it to. The buffer exists because certainty is a feeling, not a fact. And when you build your life around facts instead of assumptions, everything becomes more stable. Rule 5. Aim for boring, sensible coverage. When people hear the term emergency fund, they often think they need some big, impressive number. And that can feel overwhelming. But that's not the goal. You're not trying to build something impressive. You're trying to build something reliable, something solid, something stable. And for most people, a really solid target is 3 to 6 months of essential expenses. Not for your full lifestyle, not for holidays, and not for upgrades. Just the core things that keep life running, like housing, utilities, food, transport, insurance, the non-negotiables. Because that's the level where a bad month stops being a crisis and starts being manageable. And that's what we're aiming for at this stage, stability. And that's the foundation everything else is built on. I break this down properly in the Financial Freedom Number episode, so I'll link that in the show notes if you want to explore that further. Rule 6. It's never too late to start. If you're thinking, I should have done this years ago, you're probably right. But the second best time is today. And that is where most people get stuck. They think, what is the point in starting small? But small is where it always begins. It can be £50, £100, whatever is realistic for you. Because it isn't about being impressive. It's about building consistency. It's about proving to yourself that you're creating protection on purpose. And over time, that consistency compounds into something that actually changes how life feels. It's going to feel less fragile, less reactive, and more stable. And that is the real goal. Remember in the previous episode when we talked about stability, flexibility, and freedom? Well, that is where your buffer grows with you. At the start, you're not trying to build a fortress. You're just trying to stop life from feeling fragile. For most people, like I said previously, that can be 3 to 6 months of essential living expenses. Things like housing, bills, food, transport, the non-negotiables. And I'm going to highlight it again. That is the point where a bad month stops being a crisis and starts being manageable. And if you're unsure what that number looks like for you, don't worry. I'll give you something to help you work this out properly later in the episode. So now we've gone through the rules, let's talk about how you can build your fund without willpower. The calm way to build this is not dramatic. It's boring, like I said at the beginning. But that is exactly why it works. You automate it. It's a small amount coming out of your bank every month before you get a chance to spend it. And you don't wait until you have loads of money left over, because most people never actually do. But you build it quietly, repeatedly, and without needing motivation every month. Because the goal isn't speed, the goal is stability. And the one rule that makes this work long term, the main rule, if you use it, you fill it before you upgrade your lifestyle. Grab a pen and paper and write that down. If you use it, you refill it before you upgrade your lifestyle. And if you want to actually put all of this into place, I have created something simple called the Emergency Fund Builder. It will help you work out your number, and so you can see exactly where you are right now. And it will give you a clear plan to start closing that gap. So you're not just listening to this episode, you're actually building something from it. And I'll leave that linked in the show notes. So what counts as an emergency? An emergency is anything that's unexpected, necessary, and not optional. The boiler breaking? Emergency. Car repair you genuinely need? Emergency. Income gap? Emergency. Black Friday sale? Not an emergency. Holiday spending? Not an emergency. Something you just feel like buying? Not an emergency. Because if everything becomes an emergency, the buffer loses its meaning. Because joking aside, you kind of get where I'm going with this. You're kind of getting clear of what is classed as an emergency and what isn't. Because if everything becomes an emergency, the buffer loses its meaning, and that is the only way the buffer stays protected. So now that we've built the system, we've protected it, and is a lot more efficient, the next thing we need to deal with is pressure. Because for a lot of people, even when everything else is working, there's still something quietly pulling in the opposite direction, and that's debt. So in the next episode, we're going to break it down properly, from how we think about it, to how we handle it, and how we stop it from slowing everything else we're trying to build. There's a quote from Warren Buffett that sums this up perfectly. Do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving. But that's what we've done today. We've stopped hoping that there's something left at the end of the month, and we've built a system that protects your future first. Because when you have a real buffer, panic turns into a plan, and stress turns into something manageable, and normal life problems stop derailing your bigger picture. And in the last episode, we built your calm cash flow system. That's the engine. This episode, we've built the seatbelt. Because the goal was never to make your money look more organised. The goal was to always make your life feel less fragile. And when you have that, you don't just have savings, you have space. If you enjoyed this episode, it would really mean a lot if you took 30 seconds to follow the show and leave a quick review. It's what helps more people discover this and start building their own work optional life. You'll find everything else, including deeper dives and practical tools, over on my Substack, which is linked in the show notes. And as always, strategy beats stress, systems beat willpower, and your future is built on what you do consistently and not occasionally. Until next time.